was courageous. He was tenacious, and he was dedicated.
Extremely bright, full of integrity, and always honorable.
Hy's style was never confrontational or excessively adversarial, and that's because he was operating on his brains and his ability and didn't need the bombast.
It was November 1923, with the Russian Civil War closing in, when Louis and Anna Soloway packed up their belongings and with son Hyman set out for Canada. They would join their eldest boy, Harry, who had left the Ukraine in 1919, settled in Ottawa, and put aside enough money to pay their passage. There was little to distinguish the Soloways from the 124,000 immigrants who entered Canada that year, but young Hy was about to change all that. The family settled in Billings Bridge, where a small Jewish community had been evolving since the early days of the century. Anna set up house, Louis set up a business selling fruits and vegetables, and 10-year-old Hy set out for school. Starting without a word of English, he finished grades 1 through 8 in just 3 years, and by age 15 was a champion orator at Glebe Collegiate, and the English language had become his trusted servant. Hy prospered at Glebe, performed with the Drama Society, looked after business for the school yearbook, and he excelled scholastically. With scholarship in hand, he was off to Queen's to study science in 1936, but 2 months into the term, unbeknownst to his parents, Hy switched to arts, and after graduation enrolled at Osgoode Hall. By 1939, Louis and Anna, who had wanted a doctor, had a lawyer instead, one with a very promising future. Hy Soloway hung out his first shingle on Spark Street in 1939 with Sam Berger and Michael Greenberg. After 4 years in the Army, he began to practice law in earnest, teaming up with his old high school friend Jack Mirsky in 1946. They did litigation and just about everything else. The name Soloway Wright was still 2 decades away, but the seeds of its reputation had been planted.
I arrived at Mirsky, Soloway, Astley, and Houston in the spring of 1957. At that time, there were 4 partners and 3 juniors, and I was the junior of the 3 juniors. As a brand new lawyer in that office and as a long retired judge, I still am amazed at how one person could turn to so many different facets of the law and handle them so well. The answer I have come to is that he has obviously a wonderful intellect, but coupled with that, I think there is an incredible curiosity. Hy Soloway is the best all-round lawyer I have ever run into.
As a young lawyer, Hy would often ask you to prepare a memo on some point of law that involved his client's case, and you'd run off and burn the midnight oil to get it done and get it nicely done. I can remember handing it over to Hy and Hy reading it and looking up and arching those famous eyebrows of his and saying simply, "This is not helpful." And I would say, "Well, that's the law." He'd arch the eyebrows again and say, "I know the law. Get me something helpful." And eventually I got the message, and the message was that if the law as it stood did not favor his client's case, then Hy would use his imagination to search out avenues that would see the law changed. He was so versatile. He was the finest commercial lawyer, I'm sure, in the country.
My first memory of Hy Soloway was going to his office with my mother. I guess I must have been 5 or 6 years old. His office was on Elgin Street in the Central Chambers, I think it was, just opposite the National Arts Center. But my strong memory is of my mother taking advice from a man who seemed wise and capable. And I guess it's from that very meeting that I trace my desire to be a lawyer, to be able to help people like that, to give guidance and advice. Of course, many years later, I also worked in Hy's office as sort of an office boy, doing mail after school and running errands. And by the way, Hy, you know, I still haven't signed those release papers for the action for wrongful dismissal. So I hope you've got counsel.
By the mid-1960s, with a thriving criminal and litigation practice, Mirsky Soloway had arrived on the Ottawa legal scene. But the firm was ready for changing times, and as the 70s unfolded, Hy was exploring new opportunities. Branching into regulatory law, he was retained by the National Energy Board as special counsel during the landmark hearings on the Mackenzie Valley pipeline application. And as developers like Minto and Arnon started to reshape the National Capital Region, they needed an advisor whose insights and instincts went beyond the law. They found one in Hy Soloway.
When Hy's office was on Metcalf down there at Lisgar or wherever it was, outside lawyers like myself spent a lot of time going to meetings, we did discoveries in their office, but commercial business resolution meetings, so and so. And you'd be taken to a conference room. I remember particularly this one conference room. And Hy was the person who just could not live without knowing what was going on in the office at all times. And he'd do this little thing, I remember it as though it was yesterday. It was almost like he would pretend to accidentally burst into a room. So the door would open right in the middle of a conference, and it would be Hy, and he'd say, "Oh, I'm sorry," and he would sort of half back out, but not really. And the next thing you know, he was in the room and saying, "Hello, how are you doing?" and talking about the transaction. And I'm 99% sure he did that deliberately. He'd go by, the conference room door was closed, and he just couldn't resist. So he'd sort of accidentally come into the room, and the next thing you know, he was part of the meeting. And that way, he knew everything that was going on in his office, and there was a lot going on. He was and is a larger-than-life figure, no question about it, and a really outstanding example of the best at the bar, certainly in my lifetime.
He was a businessman's lawyer in the sense that he wanted to help facilitate and close transactions. He was not the type of person to come along who would raise so many potential difficulties with the transaction that the client would say, okay, well, I better not do it. Rather, Hy would always be looking to ensure that the client wasn't being unduly exposed, that there were exit strategies in the event that things didn't work out the way everybody expected them to be. And, that was the way in which he protected his client. And, Hy's knowledge of activities went far beyond the straight legalities involved. It was much, much more into strategy and valuations and real estate business activities, etc. And, my uncle used him as a very close confidant as to how to structure all of those things.
Hy Soloway has left his mark on Ottawa in more ways than law and business. His wisdom, energy, and ability to get things done have shaped our community. He's been a governor of both universities, the Soloway Chair in Business and Trade Law at the University of Ottawa and the Soloway Jewish Community Center testify to his generosity. And as chairman of the Ottawa Civic Hospital, he helped to build the partnership that has evolved into our world-renowned Heart Institute.
Hy's contribution to healthcare in Ottawa has been enormous. Hy was always there, and we went on campaign after campaign after campaign for this, that, and the other component of the Institute. He was always there. He was always one of the first people to come through, and that was enormously important because, he was one of Ottawa's leading citizens and highly respected. And when a fundraiser could say that a donation had been made by Hy, it carried a tremendous amount of weight.
Hy Soloway has been on the board of the University of Ottawa since 1990, and since then he's been on about every committee of that board. When Hy Soloway speaks, people listen. They listen because he's wise, because his judgment comes through, because he's got experience to share, and he's got a mind like an encyclopedia. This is why, of course, not only do people look to him at board meetings, but the administration of the university continues to seek his advice on a very regular basis on all kinds of matters. In 1996, I was so pleased to be able to present Hy with an honorary degree from the University of Ottawa.
It's impossible for anybody who came into the community over the course of the last 40 or 50 years to have not had something to do with Hy Soloway. He was involved in everything. He was involved in UJA. He was the president of the Jewish Community Council. He was president of his congregation, Bet Shalom, which was the major congregation in the city. He was involved in things outside the community. He had the respect of everyone. He was a force. He was a presence in the community. Anything, he was like the go-to guy. If you wanted to get something done, if Hy Soloway said it was okay, it got done. He never had to be out in the forefront and say this was, made by Hy Soloway, done by Hy Soloway, signed off by Hy Soloway. He just made sure that the right players were in the right places at the right time, doing the right thing, and he did it so quietly and gently that people didn't even know that it was happening. It was just natural. If we'd have a dozen Hy Soloways, if they got along with each other, we would be not just the capital of Canada, we'd be the capital of the world.
People who've practiced law with Hy or tried to keep up with him on community projects have always been amazed at his energy and capacity for work. At age 90, he's still in the office every day. But Hy tries to balance the different elements of his life. His family, wife Ruth, children Lawrence and Susan, and 5 grandchildren were always his top priority. And for the last 50 years, he's made a point of finding time for a weekend game of golf.
Hy's been my lawyer for 35 years, and I've been playing golf with him for that long, too. I should definitely stick to law. One time in the 40s and 50s, the other golf courses in Ottawa did not want Jewish members, and that was the beginning of the Rideau View Golf Course. And Hy was very instrumental in getting the group together, and now it's become a full golf course with all members of all different faiths and religions, and we've been a very successful golf course.
The money he wins from us won't keep him living in Rockcliffe.
I'm a week older, and my golf is much better than Mr. Soloway. And I hate to rub it into him, but he's starting to realize that now.
I play with Hy, and I keep telling him what to do right. Keep his left arm stiff. Keep his eye down on the ball. But, go tell a lawyer what to do. It's like telling your wife what to do.
Hy, I hope you continue to come out every weekend with us to enjoy the golf game that we have enjoyed all these years.
Actually, Hy's a good putter.
Happy birthday, Hy. Mazel tov.
Happy birthday, Hy.
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 Happy birthday, Hy. Hope you have many, many more.
Hy, je voudrais te saluer et te souhaiter un joyeux anniversaire.
Happy birthday, Hy. Yom Holedet Sameach.